Hi everyone, my name is Megan Burney and I'm going to be sharing a study that I found that relates to parents' involvement in their homework, in students' homework. The main topic of this study and the main question that it asked was, is parental involvement in homework positive or negative when it comes to academic achievement? So it was a very specific study that really not only looked at if homework led to academic success, but if parents' involvement in homework led to academic success. This study was prompted because there have been so many contradictory studies about homework. Some studies say it leads to academic success, some say there's no evidence, and the beginning of this study reflected on this and decided to just focus on the aspect of parental involvement. And it broke this down even further by coming up with 3 types of parental involvement and tried to figure out which type was the most successful when it led to student success. So why is this important? Number one, it can help with that really tricky debate of, is homework actually important? Does it lead to academic success? I know that my colleagues and I have different opinions about this, and those opinions can change over time. Some of my colleagues assign homework, some don't. Our administration gives us the choice of what we would like to do, and as long as we have a reason for what we do, they support us. But there really isn't just one study or one important fact that says, yes, this will lead to success. But this study can be a talking point when you're making your debate of if it's successful or if it's not. This study also tackles what kind of support is most effective. So if you are talking to a parent and they want to help their student or their child at home, you can use this study to help guide those conversations of how they can help successfully. This would be very valuable in like a parent-teacher conference. So for this study, there were 43 countries involved in this study with 162,081 participants, and specifically those participants were fourth graders. Now the study mentions here that they chose fourth graders because if they chose an older grade, usually parental involvement declines as students get older. So I teach 8th grade, so I've seen that as a teacher. Like even heard parents say, we've been trying this for years, we don't know what to do. So there is some of that like giving up behavior that you can see as it gets a little bit later, or they kind of back off as the kids get older. But fourth grade also, it's young enough where the parents might be involved more, but the academic rigor does kick up a notch in fourth grade. The way they assessed this was using the TIMSS assessment scores, which is an international assessment that specifically tests students' science and math scores. So the study really just looked at science and math. They didn't get any data from other subjects, but it's a good talking point to say, hey, they went up or down in math or science based off this involvement. Now, the 3 behaviors that they evaluated from parents were: 1, if the parent simply asked if their child got their homework done, which was the least invasive; or 2, if the parent helped the child, sat down and helped their children with the homework; or 3, maybe didn't help the child, but they were checking homework to see if it was done. So the asking was the least invasive, helping was the most, and checking was somewhere in between. And I will say the results of this were very interesting and not what I expected. Also, this study did take into account what the society was like of these students, whether they lived in an individualistic society like the Netherlands, which means it's a society kind of like ours in the United States, very independent, very like self-focused, or if it was more of a collectivist society like Indonesia, which is more about the group and interdependence and loyalty and relying on one another. This does play a role in the outcome, and it's an important factor that I'm glad they put in this. And the way that they indicated this on their data table was an individualism score range from -171, meaning it's not an individualistic society at all, like Indonesia was the lowest on the score, and Netherlands was 182, so they were the highest. And then all the other countries and societies led were somewhere in between there. Now, the results were interesting. The asking behaviors led to the most academic success. So the parents who simply trusted their child or student and said, "Did you do your homework? Yes or no?" Led to the most academic success. And the study kind of explains that this made the children more autonomous on their learning. Like, it was still on them. They had a caring adult who at least checked in and just asked, but they didn't have someone ultra controlling doing the homework or being very controlling about their homework with them. The helping and checking behaviors were actually negative towards academic success. And I think this is a valuable finding, not just for homework, but for other aspects of education. So this is just the raw data. It shows the mean score, and you can see here asking your child if they've done their homework led to the highest results of academic success. So what's interesting about this study is autonomy might be the key to success, especially in individualist societies like the United States. This could also be a lesson for teachers. Like teachers, if you are maybe less controlling for some of your students and you allow them to be on their own and maybe fail, learn on their own, that it could lead them to be more autonomous and more successful. It also is a reminder that parents need to give up some control, because control can sometimes have the opposite effect. But it also did talk about how societies that are used to control, like those collectivist societies, they're fine with any type of parental involvement and fine with the control. The findings are more from the individualistic societies who did better with the asking behaviors. So some connections to our course. This connected especially to one of the last units that we did about parental involvement. I thought specifically about that video that we listened to about how parental involvement can heavily influence a child, but it's not a absolute it doesn't absolutely determine what a child is going to be like when they grow up. There is so many other nuance factors to that. So this was an interesting study where just asking and maybe not hovering can influence a child and their outcome. But it does kind of contradict what we learned about with parents getting involved in the school community, because this whole study was more about how parents need to kind of back off and like just lightly be in their child's academic career. So it was kind of contradictory there. It also reminded me of the Bondi article about how resilience can be identified in 4 categories, one of them being autonomy. So lots of mentions of autonomy in our course. And then the growth mindset that we learned about is kind of reminded me how a student with growth mindset would be more confident and autonomous versus someone with a fixed mindset might think they need help with everything they're doing and might need that parental guidance and one-on-one guidance, or they can't do it on their own. Now, my opinion and what I really connected to with this study was I grew up in a household with more asking behaviors. My parents really trusted me to get my work done. And what's very honest, I didn't always get my work done. There were times they would ask and I'd say no. Or I would say yes and I didn't do my homework. But what was interesting is that fell on me, and I would have those consequences at school. I wouldn't have those consequences at home. And I do think, just from personal experience, that led me to be more autonomous and take ownership of my learning because it was my learning. I had parents that cared about me and asked, but they weren't controlling and had me open up the page and have me show them my work. They just trusted me. And when my parents just trusted me, I wanted to live up to that trust. I wanted to make them proud. So I can see how this actually did lead to more student success. And just from observation as a teacher and just as someone who's had friends who have parents who were more the latter, I do think that those other 2 behaviors could possibly lead to more like just a student being compliant or a student who could have extreme anxiety around work. It'd be interesting if they do some follow-up research, like if they just do this with students from an individualistic society like the United States and gather data to see if it's still like asking is the top versus checking versus helping. So that is my reflection on this interesting study. I hope you can get something that you can bring to either your teacher team or maybe a parent-teacher conference, because I thought this was very interesting. All right, thank you.